Okay, we are now recording. Okay, we are now recording. So we're going to get started on the presentation and the general interest meeting for the Research and Manuscript Publishing Club. This is set to start in the spring semester. For those of you who are watching this from from home, from a different time, like not currently in the meeting, my name is Kyle Blaylock. I'm a current PY4. I'm set to graduate in May. I have published one paper in a peer-reviewed journal. I am currently working on publishing a second paper in a peer-reviewed journal, which was worked with the FDA. And I also am about 2/3 of the way done a third publication. So I have on the line also Dr. Frank Brevy. He taught the class social and economic aspects of healthcare. And he has connections with this organization known as NEMA Research, which offers opportunities for students to get involved with research prior to graduating, which can really set them apart and give them a big advance in their career. So I have prepared a slide deck to kind of briefly introduce research, some of the pitfalls and advantages of research, what it entails, and then of course some ideas for this club, which is going to start in the spring semester. So without further ado, I'm going to get ahead and share my screen. I will go from here. So I have this slide deck here. Let me minimize this. Okay. So here is the first slide. And again, we're going over the new Research and Manuscript Publishing Club, which will be starting on Temple University School of Pharmacy campus, starting in the spring semester. Our agenda for today, we're going to be going over the purpose of the club, why get involved in the research, and what research really entails. Some proposed club format and activities. We're going to have a little discussion afterwards, and then we're going to discuss some opportunities for leadership in this club. So the purpose behind this club, why I wanted to start this club and really initiate the conversation to start clubs on TUSP altogether, was to provide a gateway for other students to explore research in a very informal and welcoming environment. Okay, research is a daunting task, as some of you have mentioned before, so I wanted to create more of a clear avenue for how to reach success. Other organizations will touch on research, but this club will solely focus on research exclusively. I will share my experiences, my successes, and the pitfalls of research, some of the obstacles that many individuals may encounter, especially as a student. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about how, being a part of this club will look good in your CV. It'll show as another organization or club that you're involved in. If you do leadership, it's more e-board experience. And if you do end up writing something that is published, even if it's something small like, case report or, a commentary, or, even if you go as far as a review, it will look fantastic on your CV for the future. And as Audrey had pointed out, having a publication gives you fantastic odds for landing a residency, for landing a fellowship in the future. Very few students actually will publish or even finish a manuscript, for that matter. So going to this level will really set you apart and give you a significant edge in your career. So first, I'm going to talk about the NEMA Scholars Program, just to kind of touch on some opportunities. This is what I want to mention first and foremost, that there are opportunities for students, and it is free of charge. Okay. The NEMA Scholars Program is sponsored by NEMA Research. It is ran by Dr. Joseph Pergolesi. I believe he's a cardiologist. Is that right, Dr. Brevy?
He's an anesthesiologist.
Anesthesiologist, okay.
Pain medication guy.
Okay, and he does pain management as well. Yes, okay. And he is one of the leaders of NEMA Research, along with other field experts. Dr. Brevy is involved with it. We have Joanne, who's a medical writer, and she's very helpful and very resourceful. This program has been historically offered to Temple students by Dr. Frank Brevy during the PY1 spring semester. And it offers the opportunity to publish a journal article, and it gives you mentorship with a team of physicians and a team of medical writers to guide you along the way. But again, this is an opportunity. Although there is mentorship, manuscript writing is self-directed and self-paced. You will determine your own success. So my success with NEMA Scholars, here is my publication, which I published in Signa Vitae, which is the Journal of Anesthesiology and Emergency Medicine. It is peer-reviewed. It was published in November 2021. Okay, this thing dropped down on me here. It was titled Vaping and Subsequent Comorbidities Potentially Associated with Increased Mortality and More Severe Illness in COVID-19. It was a narrative review with Dr. Brevi here. Dr. Pergolesi, he's one of the main leaders of human research, is also on this. We have Justino Verassi. He actually is he's very involved in many organizations, including the, the Pablo Paolucci
Foundation, yes.
Okay, yes, which is a big organization in Italy.
And he runs the Roma Pain Days conference every year in Italy.
In Rome, yes, which is a very big international conference. So he is a very important contact to have. I've spoken with him multiple times individually, and he will help you any way he can. In fact, he helped me publish this paper without any charge. So something to consider here. So yeah, you can see it is in the journal. It was published in 2021. I have my own DOI number. And a DOI number is basically a identifier assigned to a journal article, which registers as an official journal in a real journal. Without a DOI, you can't say it's a scholarly journal. So having a DOI is a big deal, saying that it actually has been published in a peer-reviewed and medical journal, or a scholarly journal. Okay. I'm not sure if my screen went blank. I just got a notification saying you cannot see my screen. Did it go blank?
No, I can see it.
Okay, good. So NEMA Research, they do all kinds of research. I just wanted to briefly show you how involved they are in the world of research. In 2022 alone, here are just some of the many publications that they have done. And again, you see Dr. Pergolesi. We have Joanne. She's extremely helpful. Again, Dr. Pergolesi. Another page, just lists and lists of publications just in 1 year alone, and even more. And the list goes on. And this was like maybe half of them. So They are very seasoned and very experienced in research and in publishing. And they can get you where you need to go if you work with them.
I want to add one thing. If you're interested about publications that have been completed by your professors, for instance, you can go to a website called Google Scholar. And if you put their name in, and any, pharmacist, professor, any somebody that you might know who's involved in research, put their name in Google Scholar, and up will pop a list of all the articles that they either authored or co-authored. So you can do that with anybody. And that will be the same case with you when you develop a manuscript and you have it published. If anyone does a search with your name in Google Scholar, up will come your article that you authored.
Excellent.
And that's a big deal.
No, it really is. And like I said, so few students will actually go through and publish a journal. So if you actually are one of the individuals who goes through with it and actually publishes it, that's a fantastic accomplishment. And if there's only a handful of students who are involved in the club, and that's okay, then we can spend more time and really give you all the tools you need to succeed. And then when you finally get there, you're going to say, I did that and I made it, and I'm set apart from the rest. Okay. So the benefits of conducting research and or getting published as a student. Again, it is an excellent section on your CV. It increases the likelihood tremendously for landing a fellowship or residency. It does increase the likelihood of being involved in research and or industry as a career. Obviously, having previous experience will give you an edge, because then it's less to teach you from the beginning. I mean, anything can be taught. But if you already have experience, that you're going to be a much more favorable candidate. And of course, it provides these critical skills for certain career paths within pharmacy. If you're a clinical pharmacist, you need to be able to evaluate the literature. Sometimes, one thing you'll find when you get a PY4 and get the clinical rotations is that it's not as cut and dry as his guidelines when you're treating patients. You might have a patient with like a very complicated set of disease states and medications. And it's not just following a flow chart like you might learn in P&T. Like you might have to kind of search outside the box and find and answer in the literature to make a decision. You have this kind of gray area in the literature. And you have to be able to evaluate the trial and say, is this a good clinical trial? Is this data, suggesting this is a good path to take? And so being able to evaluate literature and determine its, what's what I'm looking for, its value and its relevance to the clinical setting is an important skill to have. It could save someone's life. So as mentioned, research is not easy. We've had well over 100 students who have signed up for the NEMA Scholars Program, and so far only about 4 students have published an article in a peer-reviewed journal. And that will be 6, as Dr. Brevy had said, in the near future. So it is only a couple of students are able to do it, but again, that's not necessarily meant to discourage you. I'm just trying to like making it known that it is difficult, but we're here to help you and bringing the tools, and maybe we'll bring that number up. And if you end up being one of these handful of students who does publish an article, you will stand out from the rest. Okay. I am now assigned as a mentor for the NEMA Scholars Program. Dr. Pergolesi spoke with me for some time in November, and he said that he wants to try me as a mentor. So now I am a mentor for them, and I'll be helping other students get where they need to go. So I'm here, and Dr. Brevy is here to provide a clearer path to success. And if you're not involved in actually writing a manuscript and publishing, but you just want to be involved in the club and learn about research, see what it's about, we will do that also. So some of the reasons why students may not publish a manuscript: time constraints. We are in a PharmD program. We're going to be doctors. It is busy, right? And sometimes research can go in the back burner. That's okay. I mean, it's not uncommon for pharmacists or professors or individuals to postpone the research efforts and come back to it later. But sometimes students will postpone it and never go back to it again, and then this opportunity never is fulfilled. They're unsure how to interpret information. They have this gigantic pool of information and the literature, and there's so much out there, and they can't really put it together. That requires some practice and skill. Unsure of how to actually write a medical journal article. That takes practice as well, and that I can help you with. Too much editing involved. They'll come back and they'll send their paper out to some individuals to review it, and there will be, comments everywhere, and they're not sure how to go from there. Journal fees. I mean, I had one journal charge me over $1,000 for my FDA paper. So the NEMA Scholars Program can help with this. They may even waive some fees for certain journals. So this is something that they will help you with. If you take a long break, like more than a few months, you may forget where you left off. And that can be difficult because you're in a groove, you kind of have a rhythm going, and then you take like a 6-month break, and then you're starting from scratch almost. And then of course, lack of mentorship. This is why you have me, the NEMA group, and Dr. Brevy to help you. So before we go into the different types of research, do we have any questions? Okay. All right, this is about 20 slide presentation, so we're more than halfway there basically. Okay, so review articles. So as a student conducting research, it's very likely you'll be working on review articles. Just because it's a review article, not clinical research, does not mean it's not valuable, okay? In fact, oftentimes review articles are just as important, if not more important, than original research, depending on the context, right? Review articles are very useful for busy clinicians. They may not have time to read a 30-page clinical trial and a protocol to figure out, if drug X was effective in managing, I don't know, insomnia, for example, right? Maybe they want to have an overview and to understand a certain topic and to be able to make a decision. Maybe they couldn't remember something and they want to kind of brush up on it and find some information, right? So here are some examples of when I actually used a review article when I was asked a real question on a real rotation. And the doctor was like, can you look this up for me and find out this for me? I was asked, what degree of adrenal suppression do patients taking 5 or 10 milligrams of prednisone experience? Because they thought that, if you're taking more than 5 milligrams, that you're fully adrenally suppressed. And I found a paper which was a review article, and it said that no, there's some intermediate and possible suppression, but not full suppression. If a patient is taking tacrolimus for a kidney transplant and then they're started on fluconazole for oral thrush, how does the fluconazole affect tacrolimus levels? Okay, If a patient is being treated with colchicine to treat pericarditis, and they're also on amiodarone, how does the amiodarone affect the pericarditis outcomes? These are all real questions I've been asked, and I found answers for all of them with review articles. There are two primary kinds of review articles. I mean, they kind of break down into more like subsidized categories from there. But the two primary forms of review articles are narrative reviews and systematic reviews. A narrative review is basically a collection of information that is used to inform the readers about a topic. So if you want to know about how, consuming red wine will affect the enzymes in your body, that would be a narrative review. It's kind of like an overarching review of one topic. A systematic review is a methodical search. You use a very specific set of searches with a certain kind of methods, and you're using this to answer a set of questions, right? So examples of narrative reviews include the following, like, if there's a vaping on COVID-19, a review on Angelman syndrome, and etc. So, however, a systematic review is like more so answering a question. So, how do implantable neurotransmitters affect opioid consumption among chronic pain patients, among other things? Okay, so this is how they differ. My article on vaping kind of reviewed the effects of vaping in COVID-19 patients. So that was a narrative review. My paper with the FDA was a paper on the effects of neurostimulators on opioid consumption. That was more of a systematic review. Okay. So the timeline for writing a review article for most students, of course, if you're doing this for a living, you might be able to do it much faster. But realistically, this is kind of what you're looking at. Your first week up to a month, you're going to be collecting background information. You want to get your introduction completed, lay down the framework for your article, and then go from there, kind of get an idea of what's out there. For the next few weeks, you're going to then be searching PubMed and other databases, primarily PubMed. PubMed is the best database to search, I think, for beginner and intermediate researchers. And you're going to find out what's out there. What is the information? What do the patterns say? From there, you're going to spend about a week or maybe a little more to organize your findings and look for patterns, structure your results, and start thinking about what you want to include in your discussion. How are you going to then break down your results and talk about this, the clinical significance of this? For the next few weeks or even few months, you're going to then produce your results and your discussion sections. You're going to format your references. This takes about a full day, depending on how many you have. If you have 40 references and they're all like in URL form, and you've got to convert them to AMA, which is the American Medical Association formatting, it's going to take you probably about a full day. And then from there, for several months, even up to a year, depending on how fast you're working on it, you're then going to edit your manuscript. You're going to seek advice and mentorship from others. And then finally, when it's finally completed, you're going to submit to journals for peer review. That pretty much finishes up review articles. We're going to briefly touch on preclinical research, which I've also been involved with. So preclinical research is usually done in conjunction with a faculty member. So preclinical research involves research before it enters humans, right? So it involves studies in mice, in rats, with chemical species like organic chemistry studies, studies with cells, right? Pharmacokinetic studies, pharmacology studies, pharmacodynamic studies. These are all preclinical studies before you give a drug or an intervention to a living human. Some definitions you should be aware of if you aren't already. In vitro means it's conducted in a non-living system. So for example, it's being done in bacteria. And now of course, by non-living, I mean like a multicellular organism, like a rat or a mice or a human, right? Unicellular organism is in vitro. Okay, but anyway, in a non-living system, so a cells in a petri dish, bacterial or chemical, right? In vivo is being conducted in a living organism like mice, rats, humans, etc. Ex vivo means it is originally conducted in a living organism and then transferred to an in vitro system. So like you inject a mouse with a drug, and then you take a sample of their cells and then biopsy it. That's an example of an ex vivo study, for example. So if we work with this club, we can definitely communicate with professors and see about getting you involved with research. like with mice or with chemical species or pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. Okay. I was doing research with Dr. Walker. We had about 5 or 6 students who were working with her. Usually there needs to be multiple students reaching out to one professor for them to start an elective, because they probably won't do it for one student, most likely. They may, but I would say usually multiple students. So we can definitely advocate and reach out to professors on your behalf and try and get everyone involved with this kind of research. This also looks very good on your CV. And it can kind of give you a better idea of some of the background tasks done in industry, like in drug development. Clinical research, drug development, this is a long and arduous process, so we will not delve much into in this PowerPoint. I did take the clinical research elective track, so I know quite a bit about drug development and, GCPs, which is good clinical practices, and, the International Council of Harmonization, the Nuremberg Code, the Declaration of Helsinki, all these things which, provide an ethical framework for conducting trials, right? I can provide anyone interested with resources. I did take these electives. They are available to PY3s if you are a current PY2. You probably will not be involved with original research like this in a new drug, but you can learn about it and kind of get an idea of what you'll be doing if you get in the industry. Now, clinical research that is not drug development. So this involves investigational research in humans, right? So I was doing something very briefly. I didn't really stay involved with it because I was doing it as a volunteer, but it was an oncology study and it involved humans. And there was an IRB, which is an investigational review board, that approved the study. So these patients were being treated under a study. So some definitions you should be aware of with this. We'll just go over briefly. A retrospective study is where you survey patient charts or ask questions to, basically it's called recalling. So, if you ask a patient to recall if they've taken ibuprofen in the last year and how often they took it, and they're trying to find an association between, using ibuprofen and, vascular damage, for example. They'll kind of do a survey, which is not a very strong study. These studies are not very strong. It does help, bring light to some patterns or some areas of future research, but these are not very strong studies. It's not like a randomized controlled trial. A multi-center trial occurs at multiple sites, possibly across the world. If a study is multi-center, that is a stronger study because you're getting different patient populations, right? If you do a study in one neighborhood or one city, you might only get one kind of population, which kind of weakens your generalizability. You can't apply it to everybody. But if you have a study going on in, Asia, and then Europe, and then Africa, and then in the US and other parts of the world, you're going to kind of get a more broad sense of how something might affect everybody instead of just one population, right? And this is important for, making broader recommendations in medicine. A protocol is a document which outlines a trial's purpose, its design, inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, its duration, blinding, randomization, and everything that you must follow for the trial to be successful. Okay, so you have things called protocol deviations, which are minor. They do not affect the integrity of the trial. Protocol violations are major, and they can not only affect the integrity of the trial, but it can also result in legal trouble, right? So the FDA is always monitoring things. So you have to have a protocol because you can't just be, loosely giving patients drugs. Like, you have to have a very strict set of guidelines to make sure there are not external variables affecting your results, either positively or negatively, right? For the PY2s on this call, you'll be learning about this more so in your spring semester in biostatistics, and you'll be learning about why having confounding variables can be bad because, for example, if you are saying something is true and really it's not, that is bad. But if you're saying something is not true when it is, it also is bad, right? So depending on what it is. So if you're saying that a drug does not work and really it does, I mean, that's a lost opportunity. That drug could help somebody and now you're saying it's not effective because there was errors in your trial, okay? So, and then finally, for a study to begin, there must be a logical rationale for conducting the research. Like there's a valid question to be answered. You can't just say, you know, it, let's just give this drug and see what happens. No, there must be a logical rationale and some baseline research for why you want to conduct this trial. You must have some existing evidence supporting the benefit of the research, meaning it's based on previous evidence. You aren't just guessing, like I just said. And you must have a positive benefit risk ratio. The benefits must outweigh the risk, or they must be presumed to outweigh the risk, right? You can't just inject patients with poison and say, oh, I'll see what happens, right? I mean, that kind of stuff happened back during, 1940s. That was before the Nuremberg Code came into place, where patients were just, being injected with all kinds of stuff and tried with all kinds of things, and they just want to see what happened to them. I mean, that's very unethical. Now we have to understand what we're doing before the trial even begins. So just some examples of clinical research you might have, and by the way, these are some things I actually have seen. The second one I think I made up, but the first one I definitely have seen. So the effects of red wine on metabolic syndrome. So, red wine is not a drug, right? It's not like an FDA approved or labeled drug, but it's still an intervention, and you still need to have it approved by an IRB, an ethics committee, basically. So you have 20 patients who are enrolled and randomly assigned to either receive red wine or white wine for 4 weeks. You have baseline labs taken and then compared after 4 weeks. So this study is prospective. It is parallel because there's 2 different groups. They're being compared against each other, and it is an active comparator, not a placebo. So placebo will be like giving them like fruit juice, right? Whereas you're giving them another kind of wine, so it's an active comparator, right? Another study might be like comparing the use of comparing the use of cefepime versus piperacillin tazobactam for treating Pseudomonas, neutropenic fever, in critically ill patients. So you might ask or say there are some ethical considerations to testing or doing a trial in critically ill patients. These patients are extremely sick and a lot of them are dying. Why is this even allowed? Well, the reason for that is because we are giving them drugs which we presume to help them, right? We know that both these drugs treat Pseudomonas and can help them, right? They're both broad spectrum and they're both pretty powerful drugs. If you work in a hospital, both these drugs are pretty big gun medications. And also, so again, this is because we have a baseline understanding of both drugs, right? We aren't just guessing. We aren't saying, oh, let's inject a random drug and see what happens. No, that's unethical. Their life is on the line. But we understand these drugs and know the benefit, and we're trying to find a more effective way of treating these patients. And so because of the developments in critical ill patient studies, we have improved outcomes in the ICU setting. And then the last thing I want to really go over before we start going into the club is your mentality or the mindset of being a researcher. So we'll go into more detail on this as time passes, but in science, you want to maintain a healthy level of skepticism, right? Just because a journal concludes that this is the case, or because you see it in a journal article, does not necessarily mean that it's automatically by default true or accurate. All right, science is a very difficult field, and there are always things changing, right? Things that we conclude to be true may later turn out to be not as true as we say it is. And in science, there is no proof, there's only evidence, right? I mean, in a given trial, there's no trial that exists where every single person in the trial unanimously had an extraordinary benefit, right? There's just more patients benefited than not, right? There's always someone who's not going to receive benefit from a drug. Some patients might even get harmed by a drug, like you get drugs like statin drugs. Statin drugs are very effective for lowering cholesterol, and they're pretty safe. But some patients, even with as how effective they are, they develop myalgias and rhabdomyolysis and kidney failure with these drugs. So every drug has risks. Every drug, not every drug will help every patient. And so that's because there are so many external variables, right? So always remember that nothing is absolute in science. There's always going to be something that's not 100%. And you have to go with what is presumed to give the most benefit. Nothing is a cure, okay? So question everything, always investigate if you're not sure. Try to find other variables that affected a trial's data. Look for things like bias, right? For example, in the case where I gave ibuprofen, where patients are recalling how much ibuprofen that they've taken in the last year. What if they incorrectly recalled, right? You're going off of their word. And some studies actually do recall studies like this. Well, you're relying on patients accurately reporting what they remember, but what if they don't remember it correctly? Well, now you're going to have incorrect data, right? Poor quality data, like if you have only 10 patients in your study, that's not exactly quality. I mean, it may be quality, but it's not strong data, right? Some studies only intentionally report positive results to inflate their results to try and maybe get funding or to appear as though they found something phenomenal, but there's always going to be something negative. I mean, even in my publication with the vaping paper, I said that there were a few papers that said the opposite of what I thought was true. So I can't really conclude with certainty that vaping does X, Y, or Z. There's still some unanswered questions, right? So just always, question everything and be on the lookout for variables that affect data. So the considerations for writing a manuscript, you want to be concise, right? You want to keep your writing airtight. Your job is to just report the results and then explain them, right? You don't want to add any kind of opinion. There have been times where writers even said things like, "Oh, we had a large sample size." Well, that's not up for you to decide. That's up for the reader to decide. You just say, we have 1,500 patients. That's all you do. You don't say we have a large sample size. There's 1,500 patients, and let the readers and the clinicians decide if that was a big enough study or not. Okay. You can elaborate on possible co-founders and areas of future research, but otherwise your job is just to report your findings and that's it. It takes time. You want to avoid something called double dipping. This is something that a lot of people don't really think about. If you cite a clinical trial and then you cite a review article, which also cites the same clinical trial, it will look like you're citing two different studies and really it's only one. Hopefully that makes sense. But you want to avoid overinflating your results. Remember that the absence of findings are still findings. If you do a search and nothing comes up, that's your answer. The answer is there's no answer. Okay. That's how medicine and science grows. You said that there is a void in this area of research, and we should do more research here and try to answer this question later. Okay. As I mentioned before, you will probably never will find a topic where there is a unanimous agreement. In my red wine and pain paper, there were some papers that said that red wine improves pain, but some that said that it worsens pain. So this is a discrepancy. So therefore, the answer is not entirely clear. And again, nothing in science is absolute. There are always exceptions, always incongruencies. You have to go with what the most agreed upon pattern is and look for what the greatest benefit is. How do these considerations affect clinical decisions? So is there currently a drug on the market that exists that treats everyone to cure with no risks, no side effects, and entire benefit? The answer is no. Even drugs like Tylenol in a select few patients can cause allergic reactions, anaphylactic reactions. If you take too much, you could have liver failure. If you're on a warfarin and you take more than 2 grams, you can have elevated INR, okay? Cure only applies to disease or cancer. Otherwise, you're managing or treating a disease, okay? Not everyone benefits from a drug. You might have a 90% benefit. That still means 10% do not benefit from it, okay? So we as clinicians will determine if a drug is effective or not. If a drug adds 1 hour of sleep every night, is this effective for insomnia? If a drug lowers LDL by 10%, is this effective or not? Right? If we lower a pain score from 8 out of 10 to 5 out of 10, is this effective for pain management? Right? Part of medicine is the expectations, right? We think of a drug for pain, we think, oh, it'll remove all pain. But in reality, a lot of times you're just managing the pain to a more tolerable level, for example. So one thing I want to briefly touch on is statistics. So these will tell us if there is a significant correlation among the variables, but they do not tell us the whole story. So I'll give you an example here. during the summer, we have increased ice cream sales, and these increased ice cream sales were associated with a higher incidence of heat stroke. Therefore, according to this pattern, consuming ice cream increases your risk of suffering a heat stroke. Therefore, the recommendation is to avoid ice cream in the summer. Do you see how kind of crazy that sounds, right? If we rely solely on statistics, we can find all kinds of correlations among things that really have no relation. But these statistics do tell us we need to investigate further. There's something is there. We have to look into it further and find the common denominator, or find what's really causing it. In the above example, the two variables share a common denominator, right? So the common denominator is heat, right? If it's hotter, you're going to buy more ice cream. I mean, across the population. Also, if it's hotter, there's the increased risk of having heat stroke because it's hotter and you can get dehydrated. You see the pattern there? So there was a correlation, but it wasn't direct. So if you follow like p-values and confidence intervals and statistics alone, it can be misleading. They are a guide, but they're not the end all be all. Okay, now we kind of talked about research. We introduced some things to look out for. Do we have any questions or comments?
So I have one question. When it comes to research and like publishing, does it necessarily have to be a journal article, or like can it be something else as well, as far as to classify as a publication?
No, like newsletters can count. I think like if you I wrote something for the PLS newsletter, and that I put on my CV. So they are fine as well, but generally speaking, if you're publishing something to put on your CV, it's either a newsletter or it's going to be in a journal article, or it could be a commentary to another journal article.
Or it can be a case study report, which wouldn't be much work. You'd just be writing up a particular case.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
That would only be a page or two usually, and they're published in very prestigious journals. So that certainly would be a way of not committing a huge amount of time to getting a publication out there.
Okay.
And the one thing I wanted to mention, and I don't think I've spoke to Kyle about this. I've been involved in research many years before becoming affiliated with NEMA, and I started out doing this in long-term care. Back in the 90s, I was servicing this facility in South Jersey, the Camden County Health Services Center. And they were very progressive in terms of their electronic, health record database that they utilized. It was a fantastic system called Meditech. And as a consultant pharmacist, all I really looked at was that system. And everything was computerized. And it was such a neat system because it allowed you to look at trends, to look at how drug therapy is affecting the patient, correlating the drugs with the actual physiologic parameters. And you can do studies that way. And we've done that. And I partnered with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and a friend of mine who's a medical outcome specialist had some ideas to do projects utilizing this database. And we did things on diabetic peripheral neuropathies. We did things on non-valvular AFib in terms of the best, treatment, whether they're following clinical practice guidelines and treating patients. So we collected all this data. We were able to bypass an IRB because the medical director was fine with it as long as the data that we collected was de-identified. So I had students come with me into the facility, and I taught them how to use the computer system, and it only took like 10 minutes, and they were able to navigate and collect all this data. So we did that, and we had not publication. A couple were resulted in publications, but most of the stuff that we did resulted in poster sessions that we presented at national and regional meetings, not only pharmacy meetings, medical meetings. And my colleague from Pfizer, took care of everything. I mean, he had did all the statistical analysis, prepared the poster, did all the graphics, and your name would go on there. I did this with students whose name went on the poster. And so that would be an option. I mean, we can explore that. And so that's another way we can go, because I'm actually working with a couple places right now that utilize this electronic database where you can easily you get a lot of information. You just have to have a project idea. What the first time I really became involved, well, actually it was after that, but one of the big projects was I noticed as a consultant pharmacist, when patients in a nursing home would fall, that's a big deal. So you have to look at the drugs that they're on to see if you can correlate what possibly could have precipitated the fall. I noticed that a lot of the patients who didn't fall were on vitamin D and calcium supplements. So we did a whole study when Dr. Rafa was the head of the Department of Pharmacology at Temple. You can check that article out. It was fascinating. It had to do with the vitamin D and falls in a nursing home. And this was all from data that we collected utilizing this database. And that resulted in a publication. It's been cited many times, actually. So that's available. The two areas that I'm really interested in, I think I might have mentioned this to a couple of the students. I really want to get this one publication on the prevalence of opioid use disorder in the nursing home population. And I've noticed that in doing some chart reviews, I'm seeing patients' drug regimens that patients on methadone, like high dose methadone, why they had OUD. And that is becoming an increasing problem. So I have, there's going to be an opportunity to collaborate with physicians that are interested in that. Now, the one physician, she's a MD in Mexico, and she's a pain specialist. She's very interested, so she would be a mentor. And the other big topic that I'm interested in, the increased prevalence of colorectal disease in young adults. It's becoming a big problem. So, and there's a physician down in Colombia who's very interested in that. And she's not only an MD, she has an MBA in epidemiology. And she just started in this cancer institute. So she's very interested. So those are two opportunities that that are out there. So there's just so many different ways to go. So I think this is an exciting area, and you have to really decide what you want to do. Like whether you want to do a narrative review, whether you want to do a case study, whether you want to get real detailed with a project. The thing with NEMA is we do have a bunch of topics that we're pursuing, that we're looking for students to express interest in and work on that. But also it can be projects that you might want to propose yourselves, something that you're interested in. So the sky's the limit.
I agree. And like I mentioned before, it is definitely not an easy task. I don't want to sugarcoat it and say it's going to be a cakewalk. But at the same time, I think that one of the biggest obstacles is that some students kind of walk into research and not really know what to expect, and then they approach this daunting task, and then they end up not following through.
If you look at Kyle's paper that he did on vaping, it was very detailed. It was an excellent paper. And obviously, it took him a lot of time to do that. Why don't you, Kyle, just briefly talk about how much time it took you to put that together, like on a week by week, month by month basis, from when you started to when the paper was published?
Okay, sure. So the paper, I wrote the majority of the paper on my winter break between the fall and spring of my PY2 year. I started the topic in August of 2020, and I got my introduction and my methods done by September. And then I got a little overwhelmed with the semester, which is okay. Like that happens. Like your school is a priority for you. But I went ahead and I kind of postponed it for a couple of months. So then when December rolled around and I had off for a month between semesters, I wrote pretty much the entire paper between December and mid-January. So I would say if I were to like erase the downtime and just look at how long it took me to write the first initial draft, it took me probably about maybe 2.5, 3 months to write it. But again, because of that downtime, because of the semester, I was doing a little bit here and there. It realistically was probably more like 7 or 8, maybe like 6, 7 months, probably. That was just to do a draft. Then I went through editing. So I submitted to NEMA. I got feedback. I made the edits. By the time I had a final draft, I submitted it multiple times for revisions. From the time I started in August to the time I had a final draft ready for submission to a journal, it was in April. So August to April, what is that? Like 8, 9 months. So I had it done in less than a year.
So how many hours a week would you say you devoted to this project?
So when I was working on it during my winter break, I was probably doing about 3 to 4 hours a day. So I would say 10 to 15 hours a week during the winter break. During the semester, I might have done maybe 2 to 4 hours a week, just a little bit here and there. So it depends on what you're doing at the time. If you're busy with school, just a couple hours a week is all you need to keep it moving. And then when you're off, you can really like hammer down and get a lot done because you're off.
Okay, that's good information because that gives the students an idea of what it entails to embark on, this project or these types of endeavors.
Right. One thing I
Yeah.
would suggest. I'm sorry. Sorry. Ed.
If you didn't have any schoolwork, you could spend a lot of time on it, but your schoolwork is your primary, your top priority.
So one of the things I wanted to suggest is I wanted to suggest that we kind of introduce research gradually, right? So I think that initially what we were doing is we were enrolling students and saying, here's your topic, get and write it. And again, like this is a daunting task as mentioned previously. So we could like start like giving like small, like very small like assignments, possibly. I don't want to like give like homework per se, but like small tasks like try out and like give suggestions and feedback and mentorship to the students and gradually build these skills needed to write a full manuscript.
Right.
I can guide the students through what I went through and how I was able to produce a full manuscript and some of the writing skills.
And students can also work in tandem on the project.
Yes, that too. Absolutely.
So if you have a classmate that you get along with, that you like, you want to spend some time with researching a topic, the two of you can do it.
Okay. So for the club format, we're looking to having 2 to 4 general body meetings, just like most organizations. We are considering having a group chat. That way you have resources and you can contact your classmates and myself, Dr. Revi, as needed, right? We are considering making a Canvas page to streamline all resources into one location. That way it's accessible, and that way you can find it all in one location. I am always here to answer your questions and guide you, and so is Dr. Brevi. In fact, I invite you to email me your phone number if you would like to, and I can always guide you through with any questions. If you have a question, just text me or email me, and I'll be happy to help you whenever you need it. I've written 2.5 manuscripts. I'm finishing up a third, so I have quite a bit of experience. Dr. Brevi has a lot more than I do. So we are more than happy to help you, and we want to see you succeed. Do we have any feedback? Anything you want to see, or anything that you're happy to have heard so far, or things you want to see happen or not happen? We invite your feedback now.
I have one more question. So Dr. Brevi, you just mentioned that there was like a list of topics that NEMA has for research.
Yes.
Would you be able to like share that like in an email or like the link so we can it could be like a starting point?
Yes. Yeah, the person that is coordinating this was Morgan Wagner. She's she works with NEMA research. She's not a pharmacist. She's more of an operations, specialist. And I will get the list from her, and I will send it to if you could provide me with the email address. I have Andre's and I have Arena's email, but I
Sure.
don't think
I can
have
send you, I'll send you an email after the Zoom link. Yeah.
other student on here. In fact, but why don't we introduce the other student that came on late? I can't see the name on here. I see her picture.
My name is Muhibatu.
Okay, great. What year are you in?
Second year.
Second year. Okay. I know you came in late, but this whole session was recorded, so you
Yeah.
the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
I have to get your email. I don't think I have it. Unless you sent me something in the past. I don't recall.
I will.
Okay, great.
So I think it's our last slide here, and then we'll go ahead and conclude the PowerPoint. Of course, e-board opportunities and leadership opportunities. This is an unformed club that's starting in the spring semester, as I mentioned multiple times. So one thing that Haley has mentioned that for clubs, the one condition is that they will not receive funding from the school. Okay, so organizations like SSHP, ASHP, IPHO, et cetera, they will receive funding from the school. Clubs do not. So I would be happy with, purchasing pizza every now and then, or things for the club out of my own pocket. Just, I'm totally fine with that. I want to see it succeed. So I will do what it takes to make sure that everyone is enjoying themselves and having a learning environment. So there will not be a treasurer, but this may change in the future. We do want to have a vice president, right? Because I'm starting, I'll be the president until May, just for a few months, and then I'll pass it on to somebody else. I really just want to get started, lay a framework, see how it does, get feedback, and I want to really help, propel several students or more into having a successful research experience. And then once I graduate, I will then be passing the torch on to somebody else to run the club. We may discuss electing a president-elect in the future. This again is something that will come later. We will want to have a secretary and a social media chair, somebody who will post on social media, talk about the club on like Instagram and Facebook and etc. So we're looking at a minimum right now of 3 positions. So vice president, secretary, social media chair. We may add more later. If anybody thinks we should have any other opportunities, please let me know now or email me later. What do we think about this?
Sounds good. It would be nice if we can get some funding. I'm just trying to think if we can apply for grants to fund this as a student initiative. I have to think about it, but that might be a possibility.
Yeah, how about later on the meet at the Bradley? I'll give you a call and we'll talk about this more in detail and see what we can do. But as far as from the school, the school of pharmacy, they're not going to give us funding as of now unless things change. All right. So if anybody's interested, again, it'll look good in your CV. I'm not going to ask a lot of anybody. It's just getting started. I really want this to be an enjoyable experience. I don't want anybody to feel like it's going to be work or it's going to, be stressful. You're here to learn. You're here to get the experience and see what it's about. And I want to make it informal, enjoyable, and I want to see you do well with this because everyone who's on here is here for a reason because they're interested in research, either being involved with it or learning about it.
Now, how often is this club going to meet again? I'm sorry, I might have missed that.
So we're looking to do a Canvas page. So the resources will be there 24/7 if you want to do things on your own. I mean, it is self-directed. Research is to a degree. And of course, will be accessible to answer questions as needed. As far as meeting goes, we're looking to meet between 2 and 4 times during the semester. My first block this year coming up is going to be at Inspira in Vineland, New Jersey. So I will not be on campus much until February. So our first meeting for the club will probably be over Zoom like this. And then for the remainder of the semester, it will be in person. So we'll start off over Zoom initially and then move over to in person.
You have to say hello to Joe Alessandrini. He's a good friend. I worked with him many years at Jefferson.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Joe is the corporate director of pharmacy
At Spira?
at Inspira in Vineland.
Oh,
Yeah,
very cool. Very cool.
I think he's class of 1980, I believe.
Okay. I'll tell him he said hello.
Absolutely. So,
Okay. So if everybody could leave your email in the chat, I do have two emails from individuals who emailed me before the meeting, but everybody else who was on the meeting, please drop your email in the chat, and I'll make sure to follow up with you after this. And again, we're looking to start our Canvas page. So,
excellent. Well, Kyle, thank you for a great meeting. This whole meeting tonight is all Kyle's doing. He arranged everything. He put that fantastic slide presentation. You know, just sitting in on this meeting, you've really got a lot of information under your belt, that you know more about research than 99% of other students based on this session that you attended tonight. So that's a big deal. And Kyle's to be commended for his you know, diligence in putting all this together.
thank you. And this is only a brief intro. There's so much more to come. And, you know, it's not like a class where you're going to be graded or where, you know, it's any kind of assignments, but you know, I will give you the tools. Dr. Bradley will give you the tools, and you will make whatever you want of it. You know, you have the tools at your disposal, and depending on what you do with it, you will determine your own success.
Excellent.
Okay. So I will now stop recording.